A 7-2. Supreme Court decision just hit the gun law world like a flashbang, and most gun owners still do not understand what changed. If you buy parts online, build at home, or think state law is the only thing that matters, this ruling could change your risk overnight. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to reveal could keep you from making a mistake that brings federal charges into your life. Hit that button right now because these legal updates move fast and ignorance is not a defense when the rules change. Here's what just happened. On March 26, 2025, the Supreme Court decided Bondi vs. VanDerStok by a 7-2 vote. And the court did not strike down a gun restriction. It did the opposite. It upheld the federal rule on so-called ghost guns. In simple terms, the court said the federal government can treat some gun parts kits and some unfinished frames or receivers like firearms under the Gun Control Act. Let me break that down for you in normal English. A ghost gun usually means a firearm built from parts, often at home without the serial number and paper trail you see on most store-bought guns. For years, companies sold kits that many people believed were outside normal gun sale rules. Some of those kits could be bought online, shipped to your house, and finished with basic tools. No regular retail gun counter, no normal serial number process, no standard background check in the same way as a completed firearm sale. That is the heart of this case. The ATF made a rule in 2022 saying, hold on, if a kit comes with what you need to build a working gun, and it can be finished pretty fast with common tools, the kit can count as a firearm. The same idea applied to some unfinished frames and receivers. Those are the core parts of a gun. The lower courts in Texas and the Fifth Circuit were not buying it. They said the ATF went too far. For a while, it looked like this rule might collapse, but then the Supreme Court stepped in and changed the game. The court said the challengers were making a facial challenge. That means they were arguing the rule is invalid in every single application. And the justices said, no, that argument fails. Why? Because at least some kits clearly fit the law. The court pointed to products like build kits that contain all the key components and can be turned into a working pistol in a short time using common tools. If it walks like a gun, ships like a gun, and becomes a gun after a short build, the government does not have to pretend it is just a random box of parts. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The court did not say every screw, spring, or chunk of polymer is now a firearm. That would be a huge overstatement. What it said was more targeted. Some kits qualify, some unfinished frames or receivers qualify, especially when they are clearly identifiable gun components and can be readily completed. That word readily matters. It means the time, skill, equipment, and effort needed are all part of the picture. So first thing, the federal rule survived. Second, the ATF still has power to regulate covered kits. Third, companies selling covered items may have to serialize them, get licensed, keep records, and run background checks. And fourth, the people who thought this whole rule was dead are now dealing with a very different reality. But here's the crazy part. A lot of viewers will hear that and think, okay, this only matters to hobby builders. Wrong. This reaches beyond the workbench. It affects online sales. It affects shipping. It affects how law enforcement traces guns. And it affects how states enforce their own laws next to federal law. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the 5 words that can protect you when police ask about your gun. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because the small details are usually the ones that save people the biggest headaches. So why do I say this decision hits state policies instantly? Because the second the Supreme Court upheld that rule, the federal baseline stayed in place across the country. That means even in states with weaker rules on homemade gun parts, the federal rule still matters. And in states with tougher rules, local officials now have one more legal support beam under their enforcement efforts. Here's a real-world way to think about it. Imagine 2 gun owners. One lives in a state with strict ghost gun laws. The other lives in a state with looser rules. Both think ordering a parts kit online is just a state issue. But after this ruling, that assumption can get you in trouble. If the product falls under the federal rule, the seller and the buyer are dealing with a federal framework whether the state is strict, loose, red, blue, rural, or urban. That is why this matters instantly. The map may look different from state to state, but the federal floor did not disappear. Here's what most people get wrong. They think Supreme Court gun cases always expand gun rights. Not this time. This time the court said a federal gun regulation fits within an old law from 1968. That law is the Gun Control Act. The justices basically said Congress wrote the definition of firearm broadly enough to reach at least some modern build kits and unfinished core parts. In other words, new technology did not punch a clean hole through an old statute, and that has ripple effects. State lawmakers who support tighter controls on unserialized guns will point to this ruling and say, see, even the Supreme Court recognizes these kits can be treated like firearms. State attorneys general will cite it. Trial courts will cite it. Police departments will adjust enforcement and tracing practices around it. Companies that sell these products will have to look harder at what they are offering, how complete it is, and whether they are stepping into firearm territory under federal law. Now, let me give you a hypothetical example to explain this. Say a company sells a kit with nearly everything needed to build a pistol, plus instructions, plus compatibility with common tools, and it can be finished in a short amount of time. After this ruling, it is much harder to argue that product is just harmless parts floating in legal limbo. The federal government can say no, that is close enough to a firearm under the statute to regulate it. But wait, there's something even more important. This case was not just about what the rule covers. It was also about what the challengers failed to prove. They tried to knock out the whole rule everywhere, all at once. The court said they could not do that because some applications are clearly lawful. That leaves room for future fights over specific products. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. That sentence matters more than ever here, because this ruling is not a blanket answer for every item on the market. Some future seller may still argue that a specific product is too incomplete, too raw, or too far from a working firearm to be covered. That kind of fight is called an as-applied challenge, and yes, those battles are probably coming. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the gun owners who get these updates first before the rumor mill turns them into nonsense. Click subscribe right now so you stay ahead of the next ruling instead of hearing about it after the damage is done. Now let's talk about the part nobody's talking about. What did the court not do? It did not say every unfinished object is now a gun. It did not say a random block of metal is a firearm. It did not say every replacement part is controlled the same way. And it did not erase state gun laws. The last part is huge. Most people think when the Supreme Court rules, state law disappears. That is not how this works. Federal law and state law can operate side by side. Sometimes state law is stricter. Sometimes federal law fills gaps. Sometimes both can hit the same conduct. So if your state already bans or tightly restricts unserialized homemade firearms, that state rule may still stand on its own. If your state is less aggressive, the federal rule still matters if the product fits the court's logic. That is why you cannot say, my state allows it, so I'm good. You also cannot say, the Supreme Court only talked about sellers, so buyers are safe. That kind of lazy thinking is how people walk into preventable legal trouble. Imagine you buy a parts kit because a friend told you, it's not a real gun until you finish it. That line might sound smart at a barbecue. It might sound smart in a comment section. But in the wrong case, with the wrong product, in front of the wrong prosecutor, that line could fall apart fast. The court's message was simple. Some products are close enough, complete enough, and easy enough to finish that the law can treat them like firearms before the final build step happens at your kitchen table. This is the part that shocked me. The opinion used common sense language more than legal magic. The justices basically said ordinary people can describe unfinished objects by what they obviously are meant to become. A disassembled rifle is still a rifle. A starter gun can still fit the statute. A build kit that becomes a working pistol in about 20 minutes with common tools is not invisible just because it arrives in pieces. That matters because it tells you how courts may look at these issues going forward. Function matters, design matters, ease of completion matters, and obvious intent matters. Here are the 3 mistakes you do not want to make after this ruling. First, do not assume all online kits are treated the same. Some may be covered, some may not. The details matter. Second, do not confuse not fully finished with not regulated. That argument just took a major hit. Third, do not rely on old forum advice, old YouTube clips, or pre-ruling sales language from companies trying to move inventory. The legal ground shifted, and a bad assumption can follow you for years. And one more thing, this ruling also matters politically. Lawmakers on both sides will use it. Gun control supporters will call it proof that ghost gun rules are lawful. Gun rights groups will likely narrow their next fights and challenge specific products instead of the whole rule at once. So, no, this is not the last chapter. It is the start of a new phase. Laws change fast, really fast. And the practical meaning of this decision could keep evolving as lower courts apply it to new products and new fact patterns. Subscribe. Now, because the next video explains exactly what gun owners, hobby builders, sellers, and everyday carriers need to watch for before the next deadline or enforcement wave catches them flat-footed. So, here's the bottom line. The Supreme Court did not ban homemade firearms across the board, but it did hand the federal government a major win on regulating some ghost gun kits and unfinished core parts. If a product is clearly meant to become a working gun and can be finished quickly with common tools, the government now has strong support to treat it like a firearm under federal law. That means your safest move is simple. Slow down. Check both federal and state law. Do not trust rumors, screenshots, or sales pitches when legal risk is involved. And if you want clear updates without the fluff, subscribe right now and stay with this channel. I do the hard research so you do not get blindsided by the fine print. One last simple disclaimer before you go. This video is for education only, not personal legal advice. And if you're dealing with a real gun law question, talk to a licensed attorney in your state before you act.